Let's speak to Marwan Bishara. He's Al Jazeera senior political analyst. Marwan, I'm going to go ahead and presume that this isn't a surprise to you, but I'm not going to ask you that question. The question I'm going to ask you is, where does this leave Trump, who said Israel was on board?
In fact, he said it was very pleased with it back in end of July. But clearly, Mr. Netanyahu feels differently. And the question, of course, is not just only if I'm surprised, is anyone surprised by Netanyahu's games? Because this is, at the end of the day, is not just a political stand, it's also a game by a con artist. A con artist, and by the way, that's a name that Trump chose for Netanyahu, as testified in this new book by the New York Times correspondent by the name of Regime Change. So we know that Netanyahu continues to maneuver. And I think the Americans, notably President Trump, should have known that, because he's already had a couple of showdowns with the Israeli prime minister, calling him crazy, saying that no one likes him anymore. Even the two Jews in the room, he said, including Witkoff and Kushner, don't like him anymore, and so on and so forth. And yet, here we have Netanyahu making his own calculus. And the question is why? Why would he go up front against the American president? Why would he confront President Trump today while America is in the midst of war on the behalf of Israel in the Gulf? And the question, and the answer, the short answer, let me say, is what Henry Kissinger, the infamous Kissinger, once said: there is no foreign policy in Israel, there's only domestic politics. I don't exactly agree with that statement in general terms, but in this very particular moment in time, 2-3 months before the Israeli elections, I think there is no foreign policy. There's only domestic politics. And Netanyahu's playing to his domestic base, yes, and he wants to make sure above everything else that he wins the elections.
He's playing to his domestic base. But his paymasters, effectively, because of the large amount of money Israel gets from the US, is now in question here. I want to talk specifically about context here. Netanyahu was careful in contextualizing his rejection of the 15-point plan. Does that context seem telling to you? What's your reading?
I think it's probably even more important than the rejection, because let's say he could reject it today, that Trump will come back to him with some incentives tomorrow and maybe some more concessions by Hamas and so on and so forth, and we'll agree. But the context is far more important, because it tells us a lot about the mindset of the Israeli government and the Israeli prime minister and Israel in general. Because Netanyahu thinks this is a winning card in Israel today to reject an initiative by the so-called Board of Peace and to basically confront the American president on something he's already agreed to. And that goes to the heart of the matter that he's been preaching now for a year or two, about Israel being the Sparta of the Middle East, about praising the garrison state Israel has become. He is no longer talking about American aid. He's talking about Israel becoming such a regional, a global power that the United States will need Israel as much as Israel needs the United States. He's talking in his context about why he has proven everyone wrong. He said, first, Iran. We went into war against Iran twice, and we proved to be correct. They told us don't go into Lebanon. We went into Lebanon, and we defeated Hezbollah. They told us don't go to Rafah, and we did that, and we defeated Hamas, in his words. So he's saying every time the Americans, the Europeans, or anyone else would tell us or discourage us from doing something, we've done it, and we got away with it. So why should we not, again, get away with this? Because we want a complete surrender in Gaza. The Board of Peace kind of gives the impression, or likes to give Hamas the possibility to give the impression that there is certain reciprocity, that as Hamas disarms, Israel withdraws, right? Israel doesn't even want that impression to be out there, at least domestically in Israel. It wants to give the impression that it defeated Hamas, it occupies Gaza, and now it's time for Hamas to surrender. Anything short of that, the logical power that Netanyahu is preaching to his public would not work out.
Let's talk about the Gaza Board of Peace. You and I talked about this when the Gaza Board of Peace was being talked about. One of the things you pointed out to me back then was the disarmament of Hamas. In fact, your exact words were, as I recall, who are they going to disarm to? There isn't anybody to disarm to. And that's seemingly now Netanyahu's cry. He's saying, well, they have to fully disarm, but I don't trust the Palestinian Technocratic Committee. Was the Gaza Board of Peace designed to fail?
Well, look, first of all, it's illegal as an entity, right? Even though it was basically blessed by the UN Security Council, it was blessed before it was formed. And I say that without being a legal scholar. I think the UN Security Council, because it was desperate for a ceasefire in Gaza, it basically took a step that was illegal. You cannot recognize something that doesn't exist. It recognized the Board of Peace didn't exist, and hence then President Trump took advantage and designed it the way he wanted it. He would be the sole leader, the eternal leader of the Board of Peace. He would go into war in Iran while being the chairman of the Board of Peace. He would be appointing the membership in the Board of Peace. He would be firing and hiring and firing again members of the Board of Peace, and so on and so forth. So America, basically, the Trump administration designed the Board of Peace to its liking, to the liking of the president. And that's not exactly conducive to negotiating on conflict resolution. Two, on the specific question of demilitarization, yes, Hamas now makes a good number of claims. Some of them is it has to be reciprocal, right? I mean, we went into the war. Israel needs to withdraw for us to disarm, which we are already, meaning Hamas, to disarm. But second, Israel is already arming militias in Gaza. And Hamas says you cannot be arming militias in Gaza while we are disarming. So you need to stop arming those militias or forming those militias. Three, the international force that is supposed to deploy in Gaza is not meant to police Gaza. So at the end of the day, there's going to be some role at some point in transition. And that was part of the 15-point initiative, that this will be done over a year or so, or even more, in order to make sure that there's a sound transition. Again, Netanyahu doesn't want any of that. He wants a Hamas surrender. He wants to continue to control Gaza. He doesn't like, as you asked one of your earlier guests, the idea of a board of peace. He would love it to be a board of war, if possible.
That's Marwan Bishara, our senior political analyst, live for us from London. Always great speaking to you, Marwan.